Go to the wem.io website and log in with MyWem. If you don't have a WEM account yet, you can sign up for free by entering your email address and click on I'm in. Clicking on MyWem, log in with your email address and password and click on Login. The MyWem dashboard appears and you can see all the workspaces and projects that is owned by you. So these are 2 workspaces that's owned by me. I can click on one project and now the modeler is opened. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new project from scratch and call it Customer Relation Management. And I'm going to put this project within my personal workspace. Here you can have all the workspaces that is under your domain. So I'm going to put this one on my personal workspace. Now a new project has been created and it's like an empty project. It only has one flowchart, the home flowchart in it. And when I double click on this flowchart, it's empty. So it's an empty canvas, an empty flowchart, and we can start creating our application. Say that we want to create an application based on this Excel spreadsheet. So this Excel spreadsheet is like a customer or client's overview with the customer name, the email, the address, house number, city, type of company, number of employees. So we want to create an application, a web application that is going to be representing this information, and we can manage and maintain or add new customers. So from this point, I'm going to create the application, and all the elements that you need are right on the left side of the screen. So when I drag and drop a blue, what we call a user interaction node, you can create a user interaction. I'm going to call this one Customer Overview, and I'm going to connect the start dot with the Customer Overview. When I double click on the Customer Overview, the template editor appears, and a template editor is just like a text editor, and we can have like text in it. We can have some what we call block panels in it to display information, in this case customers. And because it's WEM is based on Bootstrap technology, we can use Bootstrap elements, like on the right side Bootstrap context colors. So I can select a color, and then the panel is has a primary color. So we can have some text in there, we can have some pictures. I'm going to save this template. When I return to my flowchart, there is a preview button on the top left side of the screen. And with this preview button, you can always preview your application real time at any stage in your development process. So when I click on preview, a new window will appear, and this is your application you just built. It only has one overview screen. It has a blue and green color scheme, and this is based on the master template. We use master template to view the we use a master template to have the look and feel of the application. And because we use Bootstrap technology, it's already responsive. So when you view your application on a smartphone, it looks like this. It's got a different menu. It got a Bootstrap menu, and when you display it on a tablet, it could look like this, or even a smaller tablet look like this. And this is the view of the application in a browser. We can change the look and feel just by changing the master template. For example, we can have a Volkswagen template, save the settings, and then I have to refresh the screen, and as you can see, this is now the same application with a Volkswagen template. The next thing I want to do is not to have some text in this panel, but I want to use the data. So the data for the customers. And on the right side of the screen, you have what we call a data pane. And the data pane contains data models, web services. These are SOAP services. Remote data sources. These are OData data sources. So we can use them in our template. What we are going to do is we're going to create a data model to have the entities of the spreadsheet, like customer name, email address, house number, city, type of company, and number of employees. So I'm going to return to my project overview, and I'm going to click on the data model tab. I'm going to create a new list. I'm going to call it customers. So this is the creation of a data model, and from this point I can create the fields in it. So we've got a text field, we've got the numeric field, we've got date fields, etc. So the text field I'm going to use to have the customer name. I'm going to have a text field for the address. I'm going to have a numeric field for the house number. And I'm going to have a text field for the city. I'm going to use another one, email, and I'm going to use a validation on that data field. So I'm going to use the email validation on the data field. Click OK. So the other fields I'm going to put in later. So these fields I can use now when I refresh my data pane in the template editor. You can see that the customer data list appears with all the fields I just created. So I want to display this one in this pane, and I'm going to use what we call a list view data grid. So I'm going to use a grid-like view, and I want to have the customer name at first, then the address, house number, city, email. When I click on save and I return to my preview panel, you can see that the fields are already there, but they're still empty. So I want to like something like a button over there to have a new window in which I can enter the data. So I need something like a data entry form. I'm going to do this within my flowchart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have one of these nodes, and these green nodes, these are the data list node. So I'm going to drag and drop a green list node, and WAM automatically asks which list you want to use. I want to use the customers list. So double click it, and automatically it states add row to customers. On the right side you can see that you have a lot of actions, so you can add a row, delete a row, go to first. So these are in fact all the SQL statements that you normally have to put in the application, but we only have to select an action. So from this point I'm going to drag an arrow, and WAM automatically asks on which button exit you want to trigger that action. So I'm going to create a button exit, and I'm going to call this button exit new customer. So when I click on new customer, it creates a new record in the data list. I want to have like a screen, and I'm going to call this one details customers customer, and from this point I'm going to go over there, and when I double click this user interaction node, I have the same screen as the overview, but I don't want to view the information. I want to have like something like a form. So I want to have this data list, but I want to use that to input within a form. So I'm going to input the customer name, the address, house number, city, and email. And you can configure anything on this form by configuring the properties on the right side of the screen. So for example, for instance, you want to have the customer name required. Just select required yes on the right side of the screen, and I also want to have the email address required. So there you have. Now 2 red dots appears in this screen. So I can save this one, and I only have to add a button, the new customer button, and this new customer button I can also have a bootstrap color, like a primary color, and I also can have something like an icon. So I can have a person icon or a completely different icon I can use. Just say that I want to have a person with a plus in it. Click on save, return to my preview screen, and there you have the new customer button. When I click on this button, the new screen appears with the customer name, address, house number, city, and email, and the required fields are with a red asterisk. So now I can fill in the form. But as you can see, I cannot save or cancel this form. So I want to build in that logic, and I can do a save action with what we call a save node. So like the floppy disk, and a cancel with the eraser. So this is the cancel action, and I only have to connect these to each other. WAM asks automatically for a new button exit, so I'm going to call this one save, and from the save I'm going to return to my overview. I do the same with the cancel, create a new button, create cancel, and from that point I return to my overview. Next thing I can do is I can have the user interaction screen shown as an overlay. I'm going to show you later how that works. When I return to the screen, I still don't have the buttons there because I have to create them. But I can also show the button in a button bar. I'm going to click show in a button bar. I can have a icon, for example, a floppy disk, and give it a green color. And the cancel button, I can do the same. I can use the ignore user input because I want to ignore the user input when I click on cancel. Show the button and select the cross and have a warning like a yellow color. So when I return to my screen now, you can see I have 2 buttons. When I click on cancel, I return to my overview. When I click on new customer, now you can see this is the user interaction, but now represented as a template, as a overlay. So I'm gonna fill in some data. This is my home address. I'm living in Elst in the Netherlands. And click on save. Well, when I remove this one and I click on save, it says that this field is required. So this is the required validation. When I type in an email address, in this case, it checks that it's an invalid mail address because I have a validation on the data field. So this should be working. So now it's valid and it saves. And I can have another one. In click on save. So now I've got two records in my database. From this point I can extend the application, and I can do that within the flowchart. So when I want to edit the screen, I just have to drag and drop an arrow, create a button exit, not new customer, but in this case I want to edit it. And then when you click on edit, this screen appears. I only have to configure the customer overview to have the edit activated, and I can do that by selecting on row click. So when I click on a record, on a row, it follows the edit action. Click on save, and what you will see is now every record has a blue line in it. So it has, and when I click on this one, I can change the company name, and it's still there. So when you click on the record, all the data is automatically pushed into the form. You don't need to write any SQL statement to do that. WEM does that automatically for you. And I can extend or expand the application with, for example, a delete action. So I want to delete a record. I'm going to drag and drop a list node, but instead of adding a customer, I want to delete a row. So from this point, I'm going to that list node, and I want to create a delete action. So when I click on delete, it deletes a current row, it saves the data list and returns to the screen. The only thing I have to do is add a button on the screen, and I already got one. This is a delete button. So this delete button, I can have it also with an icon like the trash can, and I want to have a danger sign, and I want to display it only as an icon, so it has only the trash can. When I click on save, return to the screen, there are the buttons, so I can delete this record. So let's talk about the WEM widgets. Within the WEM modeler, we have a lot of what we call widgets, and widgets you can use within your template. So for example, we've got a Google Maps widget which you can use within your user interaction screen, within your template. For example, I want to have this address shown on a Google Maps, and I want to show it right beneath this form. I'm going to return to the modeler. I'm going to return to the customer details. So what I want to do, I want to have the Google Maps widget inserted into this form. So I'm going to click on the maps, click on them, and on the right side there are the properties of the Google Maps presentation. So I want to have this one responsive, and I want to fill it with the address of this customer. So the marker mode can be address or postal code or coordinate, so you can use latitude and longitude. But we already got the address information, so the street, house number, place we can use. The other thing is that you need to use an API key to do this. So the API key, in this case, you can get the API key from the Google website. I can show you this one. On the Google website, just go to developers.google.com or browse and search for get API key for Google Maps, and here you can have your API key for this Google Map widget. This is a Dutch version, but you can have an API key like this. And use it within your API. So this is the API key you're going to use. And next I'm going to have the other informations like the address, like the house number, like the city or the place, and I don't need to fill in the country, leave that blank. So I'm going to click on save and check if it's working. So this is my address in Elst, so it's working like that. So let's talk about integration. With WAM you can integrate with external systems or databases without programming. There are a few ways to do that, and I'm going to show you a few examples. The first thing I want to show you is the use of the remote data sources, and this is based on OData services, so you can use a remote data source outside your system within your WAM project. And for this I'm going to use an example. You can use the same one. This is also available on our website in one of our blogs of Alien. This is a demo with the credentials demo and demo 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can use this one, and it's a OData service which contains a data list, a few data lists of companies, products, and categories. So I'm going to use this link to have it as a OData remote data source. So I'm going to click Add Data Service, copy paste the URL, just give in the credentials, username and password, and give this a OData demo service, give it a name. When I click on OK, then the data source, the remote data source, the definition of the remote data source is imported. So now as you can see, I've got two data lists, companies and products, just like I have my internal data list, customers. So I can use these data lists within my view. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to return to my customer overview, and I'm going to add a new panel, and I'm going to show some product information. So products, I can give it a other context color. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to refresh the data pane, and as you can see, there are two data lists available from the remote data source. So now I'm going to use the products data list in also a list view in a data grid, and I want to use the, let's say, the product name, I want to have a description, I want to have a price, and I want to have the image. When I click on save and I'm going to preview this user interaction, then you will see that all the products are fetched from the external data source. It's got a name description, it's a Dutch description, it's got a price, and it's got an image. Now the image is a hyperlink, so I want to change that. I want to change that into a property image. When I click on save, now my images are available. So now I've got a products list and I've got a customers list within one user interaction. This one is an internal data list, this one is an external data list. And I can do pretty much the same as I did on the internal data list with customers. So if I want to add or edit this record, I just going back to my flowchart and I'm going to have a detailed screen and I'm going to have that as an overlay, and this is details from the products list, details product. So I'm going to draw an arrow to that screen when I want to click on a new button exit, and that's called edit product. So edit product is the one, and from here I want to return to the customer overview, and I want to save or I want to cancel the data. So I can redirect it to this node, but I can just drag and drop a new user interaction node like this, and I'm going to drag this one and have this one saved. Also, I'm going to put that in a button bar. I'm gonna use the same floppy, and I have a green success appearance. So now I can go back to there and I can go back to the cancel and also have that in the button bar, ignore user input, and I'm going to have the cross with the warning color. So it's more like this now, and the only thing I have to do is the details of the product. I have to show them in a I'm going to show them in a form. So not customers, but I'm going to have this OData demo service, the products, into a form. So I want to edit the name, the description, the price, and the image. So click on save and just see what happens next. The only thing I have to do is I have to state that when I click on a record, it has to go to follow edit product. So select this one, click on save, and I can test my screen. Now when I hover over one of the records, I can click on it and I can change the values like the price. I can also change the image or delete the image. Click on save, and now it's changed. So this is one way to integrate with external data sources. There is another way to integrate, and that's based on what we call web services consume or web service expose, and that's based on SOAP services. So it's pretty much the same thing as we did with the remote data source, but instead of using the OData service, we use a SOAP service. So just add a web service from the web. So I need a URL, and I'm going to use the same URL as which is described in the tutorial integration program. So when you go to tutorials on the wem.io website, you'll find a chapter about integration, about the SOAP services, and I'm going to use this demo URL. So I'm going to use this one, and it contains some country services. So I'm going to copy and paste this one into this URL into this field, give it a name, country services, and when I click on OK, the WSDL information is imported into the project. So now I've got a web service called country services, and it contains like 21 methods or actions. So when I unfold, for example, the capital city, it's got an input that's a ISO code, is a text field, and it's got an output that is the capital city as a result. So if I want to use this service within my project, I can use this country service. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new flowchart, country services demo, and I'm going to use that web service. First, I'm going to have a user interaction node, called it country services, and I'm going to connect it to the start node, double click on country services, and what I'm going to do, I want to use the web service capital city. So, and the capital city country service has an input and an output. So the input is a ISO code. So I can have something like a input panel that is also primary, and I'm going to use a form to do that. So I'm going to use this country code. So it's the ISO code, and I can change the label. So it's ISO code country, and then I need something to display the result. So this is the result. I can give it another context color, and this is the result. So the result is the capital city, like that. So I want to have the capital city as a result. And the only thing I have to do is to address the service. So these are the gray nodes, and these are the integration nodes. And as you can see, this one is called invoke web service. And WEM automatically asks which web service you want to use. In this case, I want to use the capital city, and I want to go over there. When I click on get country data, and from there it can be returned to the screen by default exit. So, and the last thing I have to do is have something like a button get country data, and I can have that also as a color with something like cloud, like that. I click on save. So now when I preview this one, it got an input, it got a result, and it got the button. So when I click NLD, that's the Netherlands, should display Amsterdam. Let's try it. It's Amsterdam. And when I click UK, it's not found. So UK should be GBR, and that's London. USA, Washington. So that's the way you can integrate based on a SOAP web service. A third way to integrate with WEM is by using an HTTP request. And we already used the gray invoke web service node, and next to that there is a HTTP request node. So you can call an API or a REST service, and I'm going to give you an example by using a open weather service. It's like this service. So you can call this API with this URL, and it needs a query field like a city name and also an app ID. So I'm gonna copy this URL and I'm going to use that within a new project. So I'm going to have not a new project, a new flowchart. So I'm going to have a flowchart called weather demo, and I'm going to use the HTTP request to go with that. The URL is the URL I just copied, the open weather map, and I'm going to use this one. It's got a get method. It needs a response body, so the response is like a JSON result or JSON response. So I need to store that in something like a field. And I need a request field for the city. So what I'm going to do is I'm going back to my data model, and I'm going to create two temporary fields. One is the JSON result, and one is the city, which I'm going to use as an input. So I'm going back to the weather demo. So my response body will be the JSON result, and I need a query field. One is the city as an input, and it has a queue. The other thing is what we call an app ID, and I already got an app ID, so I can copy paste that to this, and I'm going to call this one app ID. So I've got two query fields to go with that. So what I now need is a user interaction screen to get the city as an input and the JSON result as the output. So I'm going to call this one weather demo. So I'm going to drag an arrow. I'm going to have something like an input, and this could be the city as a form. So I'm going to have the city as an input. Then I've got something like, I'm going to do that with a block panel. I got the result, give it a context color, and the result is the JSON result. So that's there. And I need something like a button to trigger the HTTP request node. So get weather info is what I'm calling it. I can give this one also a color and maybe an icon like this. And what I now have to do is just connect it with get weather info and get the result back. Now I can preview the result. So I'm going to preview, and I want to check the weather in Amsterdam. So in Amsterdam, get weather info, so it calls the HTTP request, and this is the result. So this is the temperature, humidity, the minimum temperature, Fahrenheit in Amsterdam, the wind speed, and this is my hometown in Elst. And as you can see, this is the result. Now what I want to do is I don't want to have the result in like a text field. I want to store it in a database. So I'm going back to the modeler, and I'm going to use this gray integration node, and it's called import data. So I'm going to drag and drop this one over there, and I'm going to use the JSON result field, so the file format is JSON, to import the message into a database. And I can do some mapping. I need to do some mapping, and I can create the mapping from an example. Now I've got the result of the JSON, so I can use this one as an example. and just copy paste it and click on OK. So as you can see now, WAM automatically has all kinds of objects and fields defined. So now I can map these fields to a data list. The thing is, I don't have a data list, so I have to create one with the temperature, pressure, humidity, min, max temperature, and also the city. So I'm going to do that. Back to the data model. I'm going to create a new data list called weather info. Click on OK. And I'm going to create a field that's called city. I want to store the city. I want to store the temperature. I want to store the minimum temperature. I want to store the max temperature. And I want to store the pressure, and I want to store the humidity. So that's all I want to store just right now. So I'm going back to my mapping. So the temperature I can map to the weather info, and that is temperature. The pressure I've got, so this is the pressure. The humidity, I've got the minimum temperature, and I've got the max temperature. So now I've got the mapping done. So now I can use a green list node to add a record into the weather info data list. I'm going to give it some more space, like this. And instead of returning the results to the user interaction screen, I can go create a new record in the weather info. And the next thing I have to do is to get the city filled with a value, and that's the temporary field city. From there I go to there, then go to the import, and then I have to save all the changes in the data list and return to the screen. And the next thing I have to do is to display the data list results on the screen. So I can use a block panel to do that. So this is data list weather info. Oh, excuse me, weather info. And I'm going to display the weather info data list. I'm going to put it in a data grid, and I'm going to use the city, the temperature, min, max, humidity, and pressure. Click on save. So now I'm going to preview the screen and say that I want to check the weather in Amsterdam. Get weather info. Now as you can see, this is the JSON result, and this is the list, the data list content. So when I'm going to use another, so else, as you can see, else has got other values, other humidity values, like this. So we can use the import node also to import the Excel data. So we've got this Excel data in an Excel sheet, and I want to import this one into the data list we already got. So this is pretty simple. I'm going back to the customer overview. So this is the customer overview like this, and I'm going to create an import function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add first a field that is called file, import file. So this is the import file I'm going to use. This could be the Excel file. So going back to this one, so I need like I'm going to use a block, import, give it a color, and I'm going to use the import file to do that. And I'm going to use a form to do that. So import file, this is the import file. And next I'm going to create like a button to have the import function. So I'm going to create a new button, import data, give it a color, and give it import like this. Import data from file. So when you have the result, I'm going to refresh the screen. You have this import. I can import the file, import the data. And now I can use the same import node, but instead import in JSON, I can import an Excel file. So the data source will be the import file, and the target list will be the customers list. And I have to do the mapping first, so I can do the mapping here by hand, but I can also create a mapping from file. So I'm going to use the file, the example, and that's the CSV overview, like this one, and I'm gonna save them. So it automatically saves all the fields. So I'm going to map this field. So this is the customer name, this is the email address, this is the address, this is the house number, this is the city, and I don't have type of company or employee, so I'll leave that. Click on OK. So what I can do is I'm going to import the data, save all the changes, and then return to the overview. I can test the result. So now there's only one record in it. When I browse the same file, like the overview number 2, and I'm going to import the data. As you can see, all the data is now imported. So when I click on this one, all the details are there and all the mapping is there. So this was a very brief tutorial of how you can use WEM to build this fairly small application. I hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.